So thank you for meeting with me. This is my friend. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it. My name is Gopala. So my American name is Alex, and happy to be here. Happy to do the interview with you.
Hey on. So Gopala, what was your substance or substances of choice that you used to be addicted to?
Okay.
You can share in a story.
Um,
You can share just however you want to share.
okay. So it started off definitely with weed. I can actually remember my first time smoking weed. I actually didn't know how to do it. So I was trying to smoke out of like a pop can with these holes in it, and I put like the tiniest little piece of weed, like that big, on there, and I couldn't figure out how to light it. But anyway, it was marijuana, and that pretty quickly became like uh, addictive to where I mean, I had, you know, 2, 3 joints rolled up ready, for a wake and bake every single morning. And this was all while I was a teenager living with my parents. But they were, completely ignorant to marijuana. Like, I'd smoke out of, actually, I'm looking at the window that I used to smoke and blow the weed out of. But they didn't know what weed smelled like. They thought I was a skunk. So they thought that there was just this rowdy
Families.
skunk that lived in the neighborhood. My mom would come in, man, that skunk again. I said, I know. What is going on with these skunks? There must be a family. And I'm sitting there, cheesing. They don't know about the eyes. And
Yeah.
so it was really easy for me, but it was already pretty quickly, maybe within a year or so. I mean, like stealing out of my 85-year-old grandma's purse, who's literally about to die, to get weed money. So if anybody thinks or has the idea that it's not possible for people to, do unethical things for weed, I'm here to be the example that it is possible. So that I think is an important point. So like if people think that, well, I'm only addicted to weed, okay, well maybe there isn't unethical things going on, but the addiction is still the addiction. It was completely consuming my life. So anyway, the next drug in line was psychedelics, and I did those just as addictively, maybe a step down, just because you can't really go as hard with psychedelic as you can with marijuana. I did for one like rip go really hard, and it really, like, with psychedelics you can't really do that. So I took like a whole strip of what I was told was mescaline, but I'm pretty sure now that it was a designer drug because I tripped insanely hard for about 3.5 days.
Wow.
And I was, yeah, I mean, like it got really wild. I won't go into details because I don't want to like scare people that are listening to this and like make people think I'm crazy, but I probably was pretty partially crazy at the time. I had like base
Parents, or this was like
Yeah, yeah. I was up here in the bake room just frying. Yeah, I actually gave my dog a tiny tiny little piece of the mescaline, so the dog was also tripping out with me, and it was just yeah, it was not a cool thing to do. So that, and then lots of acid. I had basically met a guy who was into the Grateful Dead scene, and he had a consistent supply of acid. Some guy with dreads down to his knees gave me this mescaline, and or I guess said it was mescaline. I don't know, maybe it was. I think it was a designer drug. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is because it profoundly rocked me out, and also like brought up some psychosis and brought up some like really, really scary, weird shit that was going on. Because I was also involved with really like anti-governmental things, and I was starting to like give people acid and shit, and just like doing really like just wild things, and like starting pages. I was like reading a lot of like communist and anarchist stuff, and I was very angry also. But anyway, I'll try not to like elaborate too much on everything. But so the psychedelics, it became very addictive, was very damaging, even though obviously, yeah, there was like some profound insights and yada yada yada, but definitely was taken way over the top. So an addictive type of thing. And then let's see, and this will segue in, that addictive thing with psychedelics is that, you always want the next best thing as an addict. So I had always heard that DMT was the thing, so you got to do DMT now. I've done mescaline, done acid, done mushrooms, so now I need to try DMT. but I didn't know where to get it. And I was just completely like a dumb suburban kid. So I went downtown to try and get DMT like off the street corner like an idiot. And this older African American gentleman was more than happy to give me some DMT, right? Or so I thought. So he like took me in an alley and, had this like little pipe deal. And I didn't really know the type of pipe that you use to smoke DMT. I know you can smoke it out of a pipe or vaporize it. So it didn't like ring a bell. And I was so ignorant of hard drugs that I didn't know what was going on. It ended up being crack cocaine. So that was the first time I smoked crack cocaine. So within like 2 seconds of smoking crack cocaine, it's, a pretty intense experience. But I did though was like, dude, this is not DMT. Like I'm not tripping, but holy shit. That's all I said to him was like, because then I was high on cocaine, crack cocaine nonetheless. But I'd never even snorted regular cocaine, so this was like just blasting right into a hard drug that I had no experience with, but was immediately addicted. I mean, it was with crack cocaine, it's so powerful, and the high is so intense that the potential for immediate addiction is very high with crack. So I ended up, I was actually living downtown. Wait, I think, yeah. Somehow I had started living downtown. And I think I spent basically my entire savings and all of my rent money that night. I had like $17 left. Like me and him just went and smoked crack all night. So that was my first exposure to crack cocaine, which eventually ended up being my drug of choice. I think from there, heroin came on the scene. I think I was like getting kicked out, like I was about to get kicked out, and where I was living, there was a heroin dealer that was like right across the street. And, I still don't to this day know why I made that decision to, walk up to him that day. Cause, obviously you always hear that that's a bad, road to go down. Like that's, the one like black sheep one. But, and I'd never even done pills. So people think that, oh, you have to do pills like most people don't just jump right into heroin. I guess I kind of didn't because I'd already done crack. So that was a hard drug that I'd done before, but I had never done any other opiates. So and then all of a sudden or maybe like a Percocet or two back in high school, but nothing like serious, and it wasn't habitual. And yeah, snorted heroin that day, and that was off to the races from there on that too. And the girlfriend that I had at the time, maybe a few days or a week or so into the heroin use, snorting heroin, I had offered her some and told her it was morphine. And we were both into older rock and roll and stuff, and a lot of the bands we liked, had a lot of history of heavier drug use and stuff like that. So I think that it was easier for her to try it because all of her heroes and the people that she looked up to did it. So maybe for me too, like Jerry Garcia was kind of my hero, and he was strung on heroin most of his life, unfortunately. But that basically steamrolled into what was the original question? How did you get started on
Yeah, just like what were your substances of choice and kind of
substances of choice? Got it. So that primarily then from that point on, heroin was the drug of choice just because of the nature of as soon as the length of time that I was doing heroin, and the frequency. At first it wasn't because it's so powerful that it'll make you puke. And when you first start doing it, it'll make you puke, but then you'll just be like, in this nirvanic bliss. You just like totally, blast it out into the outer space kind of thing. Not in the way that weed is, not in the way that but it's very addictive because of that, obviously. So definitely different than crack. That, so
yeah.
okay, so yeah, so from there it was heroin, and crack was still there though too. Crack eventually became my drug of choice though. So I would do just enough heroin to get well, but crack was kind of my main. And then at that point it was IV use, and that was my main drug of choice was actually crack cocaine.
And so, what do you think, if you can analyze, like, why do you think you were going to these substances? Like, what do you think was the root cause of that made?
Yeah, so I guess I would give two different answers there. There could be more, but I would say like one, you could take it from sort of a psychological standpoint, and two, I think would be a philosophical standpoint. So just starting from the psychological standpoint, I would say that there was a lot of trauma from being bullied so heavily in middle school and high school, at least freshman, sophomore year in high school, but middle school brutally, brutally bullied. And that really like tore me up pretty badly because I never had friends and I moved so many times that I never really like when I was a child, I had a great childhood and I had like friends and it was just like a blast. And then as soon as middle school hit, we moved, didn't know anybody. And, the middle school kids took advantage of that. And I was like, not. I think my past birth was like in a higher kind of realm. Like when you don't have as strong of an ego, I think it's easier for those kids to kind of get bullied because they're like, at least for me, I look back on it, this is my explanation, but I wasn't for me, it was just like, oh my God, why are people being nasty?
Yeah.
I didn't really understand this whole bullying thing and like why people are just being so nasty because I think for me, like my past karma was more in higher realms or in spiritual planes. So, or in human births, like where I was living a spiritual life. So it was much easier for people to like, take advantage of a person like me that wasn't really, I wouldn't really like fight back or I wouldn't like defend myself. I wouldn't get brutal. I didn't have enough brute in me to sort of, battle back. Anyway, there was that. Then there was the anger. So I had a lot of anger because of what I mentioned earlier with the really having a problem with capitalism, with government, with a lot of the different things that was going on in the world, capitalism, like companies and like corporate, stuff like that. So I just couldn't quite understand, and I think also like going back to my previous point, a lot of that was maybe from past births where I was in these type of utopian societies where
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, that's how I kind of register it now, honestly, like past births where I was in places where it's like, why is there government? Why are there corporations that are like mistreating people? Why, like, this doesn't make sense to me. So
Right.
there's a lot of anger around that. Anyway, that's more esoteric, but for maybe the audience that likes that type of thing that's watching. But just from a really simple level, it was just a lot of anger, a lot of trauma. And also I was sort of breaking off from Christianity. I had a lot of problems with it. I was raised Christian, and my parents were both Christian, but I had a big problem with it. And I won't get into that. It's a whole other topic, but I don't anymore. At the time, there was a lot of anger from that. So it was really just a boiling cauldron of anger and trauma. And, especially heroin really just sort of dampens all that out to where your mind finally shuts down and, crack, I guess, too, because you're just so much zooming on a mission to get more crack that you don't have any time to think about your trauma.
Yeah.
So, and the weed, too, to a lesser degree when I was addicted to marijuana. So all of them, I think, though, for sure and the psychedelics, like they would temporarily kind of solve some of that. And I had some very deep insights about a lot of that stuff, but they definitely didn't solve it.
Yeah.
It took, we'll get to that later on. But so my philosophical answer would be that the mind, the ego is addiction. The ego structure in the mind and in the universe is basically sort of like a black hole. It's just trying to suck world experiences out of the universe to find infinite happiness, which it can't find. So it'll just keep getting addicted from thing to thing to thing to try and find eternal everlasting ultimate bliss and it can't find it. So it gets frantic. So it goes to the next thing, or it will go deeper into that one addiction. So for me, the progression, for drug. Now, some people, like might not have that, or it might be to a lesser degree. But I think if anybody looks in their life, they'll see at least little addictions or they're more spread out. But for me, it was very focused addictions, which was, I was very one-mindedly addicted to, drugs being the solution and couldn't find the happiness. So I kept progressing, so while, snorting isn't doing it, now I need to, IV use it. Now this isn't working. Now, smoking crack's not working. Now I need to IV crack cocaine. So I would say, yeah, like, it's a big question, but I could take an hour probably talking about that. But to simply put it, those would be like kind of my two groupings of answers. The philosophical point of just, it's the way that the mind is addiction. And then in the state of delusion, the state of ego, and then a lot of that past trauma and anger and such like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I never really thought about like the philosophical one, so I really like that piece. And thanks for being so vulnerable, by the way, and sharing so deeply about your past and everything. Also, the next question is, okay, so you went down that all those rabbit holes. Like, what is there like a specific aha moment, or like what was what woke you up? What made you really want to change?
Well, I think there's two answers to that, maybe. Maybe more, but I'm going to pigeonhole it in two ways. So maybe I'll answer a lot of the questions that way. I'm going to go more on a surface level for one answer, which isn't an invalid way to answer. It just, I think that there's surface answers that are, it's not that saying surface is derogatory to the answer. It is what it, then there's more deeper layered type of things. So I would say part of it was, so I was homeless, a good part of that. I mean, I had basically destroyed family relationships at that point. I had moved in the ghetto, then I went, back home, then I was in a mental ward. Then I was in rehabs. That I never stayed at. Then I'd be at a halfway house. But ended up being, I was just homeless, living in alleys with shit, piss, and cardboard boxes and living in the woods. And if I was lucky, there was a tent, something like that, but usually not. And I think just the grind of living that way, of having that frantic nature of living on the streets and knowing that heroin clock is on because you'll get sick if you don't have heroin, you'll start going through withdrawal, obviously. So it was just a very exhausting thing to always have that clock behind you, in the back of your mind, and just the daily, having a body to take care of with no showers and, having like, I remember at one point I had size 10 church shoes and I wear like a 12 and a half, and I was walking up to like 15 miles a day.
Wow.
And actually my feet got so bad and so blistered that I literally couldn't walk. I ended up getting locked up, and the judge said, we're just gonna basically release you because it's just a needle charge, you just got a needle charge and a little, whatever it was. I got caught. I was actually robbing cars, but they didn't catch me on that. And they didn't know it was me. And my friend got away, but I got popped. And all they found me with was the needle. They couldn't prove that I was hitting cars. So they only got me for that. But anyway, the judge said, we're going to OR you, which just means they're going to release you and you're still going to have all that stuff there, but you can just like, do whatever with that. And I actually told the judge, I was like, Judge, I'm going to be honest with you. Can you take some of the time off the shelf? On the shelf means it's like pending and you could potentially do that time in the future, which was 90 days. I said, can I have 83 days on the shelf and actually do 7 days in jail? Because I literally can't, like, my body's so emaciated. Like, I literally can't even. And she was like, let me get this straight. I'm letting you out of jail right now, and you're voluntarily wanting to stay 7 days. I said, can you confirm that? I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, no problem. And so they took me away, kept me, because I literally couldn't walk. My feet were so bad, and I needed to eat. I think they weighed me in at 6'2", 115 pounds. So at that point,
Was the better option.
yeah, Jarrell was the better option, and the crack had really become the dominant thing at that point too. And crack is really, really emaciating to your body. So just the grind of my body just being totally decimated, and living in shitty, pissy, nasty alleys, and just being around crazies, and then also the stress of having to steal every day because I was a thief to get my drug money, so I would go into stores and steal shit, and just that anxiety of shoplifting and not knowing if you're going to get locked up that day really, it ground on me a lot. Um, and so I think it was more of an accumulative, and I'll share this and then I'll go to the next layer. I did have a few times that I, even to this day, can remember, two specifically that I'll share. So one day I remember I was sick. I was dope sick. And it was mid-January and it was the coldest day of the year. And there was 30-mile-an-hour winds blowing. I mean, it was like 2 degrees and there was 30-mile-an-hour wind blowing, and I didn't have adequate clothing. I did have a jacket. I did have like thick socks, but I was nowhere near what you would need for that type of weather. And that feeling that day of being dope sick, knowing I needed to make money, and knowing that the only way to do that was to panhandle, which is to go ask people for money out on the street with, where I'm just gonna freaking freeze and my lips, all the slut, the snot, when I know it's freezing as soon as you can't hardly breathe, you're having to breathe out of your mouth because it's all. And that moment of standing out there and, seeing other people like standing there, like flying a sign and just like, I don't know, it just clicked to me. Like, not enough to get sober. I was a really hard-headed addict, I suppose, and heroin is just it's a beast. But I can still just remember that day where there was one notch closer to being done because of that amount of suffering was just so insane. And that amount of existential despair at the state of my life type of thing. So the second moment I remember is it was actually summer, like, go ahead.
I have to. So you were saying the
So
second.
yeah, I guess the second part of the answer would be, I'm sorry, no, the second event. We were talking about the surface events, and then I was going to get to the deeper, but was a day I just very profoundly remember this day. I had started to kind of dabble into AA. Actually, I was forced at one point. So I'm not going to go into the whole story, but when I was doing the psychedelics and stuff, I ended up having multiple psychotic episodes, and there was just some crazy shit going down that I'm not going to share here because your audience would probably turn off the video just because I'm serious. It's just so, I don't even tell people. I probably didn't even tell, like, like if I had a wife for a year or two, I'd still probably, like, I don't know, just certain shit you like kind of fear sharing just because it was just so out there that you're just like, whoa, is this person going to judge me or something like that? Or are they going to, hit the deck or whatever? Anyway, I'd ended up basically being placed in halfway houses and like psych wards and clinic. And it was just like a wild thing. But that was my first exposure to AA. That's why I bring this up.
Yeah.
I was not even a heroin addict though, but I had faked a heroin addiction is what I'm trying to say because of this psychotic episode and what I thought was going on, which was, but because I faked that, I went to a rehab and was trying to fake that I was detoxing. It was just like a whole crazy thing. Yeah, it was absolutely wild. I should write a book. It was absolutely
Right.
wild because it would make more sense if I shared but I don't even want. Um, so that was anyway, the reason I bring it up, that was my first exposure with AA. So that was the first time I was exposed to AA, but I wasn't even an addict. So I'm just like, okay, what the hell am I supposed to do this? But I was living in a halfway house, wasn't an addict until people started figuring out that I wasn't an addict because they'd ask me questions like, oh, like how much boy were you doing today? And I was like, what boy? What are you talking about? Like, I didn't know that that meant heroin. So they're just like, dude, you do heroin, you don't know the word, like you don't know what dog mean, you don't know what boy, like those are just code words that people use on the streets for like, so people kind of started like having suspicions about me, and then they eventually, like, a lot of people figured out that I wasn't even an addict, and I ended up like telling people what was going on. And then, anyway, a guy that I met during that time saw me on the street, and I was really, really bad at that point. And I just gotten back from like stealing shit I was selling. I actually, funny thing is, if you guys want to hear this, what I stole was candy bars. I was the candy man, literally. Like, people knew me at the bus stops on the street as the candy man. And I literally rolled around with this guy who was about 5'6", named Scrappy, with a child's car, like stroller, and we would go in, fill the stroller up, go out with all this candy, and me and Scrappy, the 5'6" little scrappy dude, were the candy men, and we would sell candy anyway. So sometimes like electronics and shit if I could fit it in my pants, but mostly candy. And so I was like selling candy. We had like boxes of candy. We'd sell them like $1 a piece, whatever. And that guy that I'd met in AA, he saw me, and he walked up to me, and he was just like, he had nothing but love in his eyes. And, he just looked so happy. And he walked up to me and he was like, man, hey, Alex, brother. And he just came right into a hug. He didn't even like wait for me to kind of confirm that I was like gonna, he just came and it's like, all right, what are you gonna do? Hug the guy if they're coming up. And he's just like coming, and he was way bigger than me. I was tiny. I wasn't gonna like, so he came in, just started hugging me. He was like, dude, I just want to say, man, like we love you so much, brother. And if AA can help you or I can help you in any way, like we're always there for you and you can come back anytime, even if you're not sober. And even though heroin is so blackening of the heart, you're just this dull ghost when you're doing heroin and hard drugs, you just feel like you don't have a soul. For that first moment in a long time, I felt like I had a soul. I felt like there was this small little ray coming out of my heart because I felt his love so deep. Not his love, God's love coming through him. And, I look back on that and I'm like, wow, I wanted to feel that. And it also started to make me feel a little guilty too. Whereas in the past, the heroin blocks out a lot of your ethics, a lot of your, should I be feeling bad that I've, done a lot of the things that I've done to my mother? I mean, terrible things, to where she was driving me around to rob stores and stuff. And she's just a church lady. She's never smoked a cigarette. She's never drank alcohol, and she's sitting there driving me around just sobbing, and I'm stuffing the seats full of stuff that I've stolen. And just, I mean, it was just wild. It was absolutely freaking crazy. She's meeting me under the bridge to bring me $20 or Suboxone or something like that, and I take the Suboxone and say I'm going to get sober and then go sell it for a 20 bag of heroin. I mean, like things like that should ding you in your conscience.
Yeah.
I didn't even think twice about, you know because the heroin had just totally taken over my mind, totally taken over my heart, totally taken over my ethics, totally took over any sense of me. I should be feeling bad about this. And in that moment, like I just kind of felt bad that I was living the life that I was, and that was kind of the first ray of maybe something needs to shift. So remind me of the original question again, because I had two sort of,
What was your wake up call like? So basically, those were like kind of wake up mini calls, and then like where
yeah.
moment where you're like, when did you get sober? Like when?
Okay, so the big wake up call was being locked up and forcibly not able to get high.
Yeah.
So those were the two answers. The one was the, little moments, and then the second was because I'd gotten locked up before many, many times, but I was always, especially in Hamilton County, they'll wake you up at 2 a.m., you'll come out, and I'll go to sleep and figure out how I'm going to get high in the morning. Hopefully, one of my buddies is, we kind of had like a code system. If you get out of jail, you always help that person get high just
Mhm.
because like we know how it is. But this time I woke up and it was the breakfast bell, and that terror, like I've never had that happen. They always wake me up at 2 a.m. and let me go. I'm like, oh my God, why am I still here? Chow, no, not
Yeah.
chow, not shit on a stick, not, so,
Same.
my mom actually, that was right around the time, just a small detail, but it's important. That was right around the time that carfentanil started coming out,
Oh,
which is
okay.
basically fentanyl mixed with elephant tranquilizer. It is extremely, extremely strong. A lot of people were dying. A lot of my friends were dying on the street. Well, friends, I mean, like druggy friends that we would hustle with or whatever were dying. I mean, people were falling over like, sticks in the wind. And the crazy thing about drug addiction is that like when someone would die, everybody would go and be like, try and figure out who they got that dope from, because everybody wanted the knock you over dead dope. And I think maybe my mom heard on the news that was out there, the carfentanil. It's crazy. God's grace. I can't ever consciously remember ODing, and how many ever years I was, especially with IV use. It's much easier to have a overdose. I do remember one time like passing out in the woods, not knowing what happened and waking up, but it wasn't, I guess, technically an OD because I wasn't like dying.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that was just kind of one of those things. It's like, wow, how did I never OD? But it was kind of good in that way. But yeah, so I got locked up, and then that was, my mom called the sheriff, and she was like, "Stop letting my son go." And yeah, they listened to that. Mom calls, they're gonna listen. And then she basically wrote a letter to the judge asking them to keep me as long as possible. So the judge maxed me out on all my charges, and I didn't like 9 months. Yeah.
And so when you got out of
which was terrible. So that scared me and made me feel like I don't want to do this again because it was jail. Prison, more, you can like go out, you can get exercise, you can do this, you can do that, you can like do degree programs, you've got a lot more flexibility, you've got better food. Like county is just like, you know, you're just in your cell with some other crazy person and playing cards and working out and just in your head. It's terrible. Yeah.
thank God for your mom. So that was your rock bottom moment for sure. But so you got out of jail and then you were like, I don't want to ever go back there. So what really helped you like stay sober like after that moment? Like what were like what was really helpful for you at your early recovery?
So this doesn't work for everybody, and it didn't work for me, but I chose to. So I was back in a halfway house when I was released from jail. The sheriff actually took me to a halfway house, dropped me off when I was released. But that was part of my probation. I was on probation. Was I on probation? Can't remember. Anyway, I decided to leave Ohio because the halfway houses are all in the ghetto and it's just dope everywhere. And it's just too many habits. Like I had been removed at that point and I really did want to stay sober. That was the first time I really did want to actually stay sober. But I was just a little bit too scared to be back in the ghetto, you know, where I knew one bus ride, going downtown to get dope again. So I decided to move to Florida. So I worked at Outback for like 2 or 3 weeks and had like enough money for like 1 week's rent in Florida and like $50 for groceries. And I was like, don't care, got nothing, just gonna go down there and give it a whirl. And I at least when I got there, it wasn't a big city, so it was a smaller town. Not small town, but it was definitely a smaller setting
Mhm.
than being in Cincinnati, and I had no clue where to get dope. Like I could have found it, but at that point I had enough removed where I wasn't like gonna just get down there and immediately go trying. So there was a little bit more layer, and I also just really like the heat, and I like being able to go to the ocean. So there was certain things that my mind really liked, and that I was able to give myself the feeling of okay, fresh start. So
Move
but
yourself from the environment.
yeah. I do want to say though, like that will not work in and of itself. So anybody that's watching this that think, oh well, they can just leave wherever they were addicted, go somewhere else, everything will be fine. No, it won't. So that was probably the first time that I really got serious about AA. I got a sponsor who was really cool, Ron Storm, and I remember a pretty pivotal moment, which was I was having really, really heavy cravings one day, and I had started working the steps and everything, and I was going to this one meeting pretty much every morning. It was a morning meeting, like 7, and it was really nice. But I got to know those people, and I would always recommend if you are going to take the AA approach, not everybody does, but I think that for me, and I think for a lot of people that were to the core, like hardcore, let's go addicts, it's really difficult to get sober and or stay sober without some type of support group. And I've met people where they just put it all on themselves and they just sort of like brawn it and just say, hey, I'm just going to stay sober, get sober, or, detox myself in the bathroom and the bathtub with candles and just be done. And they just do it and they're done and they never do it again. The amount of people that do that, though, I would say is very small,
Yeah.
that have that amount of willpower, that amount of discipline, that amount of ability to just completely shift their life in a completely different direction. The way, and you can even take this from a science standpoint. I mean, the way that heroin and crack cocaine and methamphetamine and certain hard drugs wire your brain, it just is very, very difficult to get out of that wiring by your own means. So I think for me and for many others, millions across the world, AA, NA, is potentially a good thing because it gives you other people who are dealing with the same things. And also, when you're in that group, there's going to be a lot of people that, have years and years and years of recovery. So they have a lot of experience with how to get through the trenches, when you are in those moments. But anyway, I remember one day specifically, I was at work. We were allowed to have a headphone in and be on the phone or listen to music at this job. And I was having like insane cravings that day. to get high. And so I just called everybody that I knew at that meeting, and I just stayed on the phone for like 3 hours with people that I knew that were like just solid in the program. And they told me to do that in the meetings, and I did it. I was listening. I was finally listening. I always had a big problem with listening in life. I still do, but it's much less now than it was then. But, if you want to learn anything in life, you want to learn how to play the violin, you have to listen to your violin teacher. If you want to learn how to scuba dive, you can't just be like, screw you, dude. I'm just going to like press this button. And it like forces all the oxygen, the wrong direction and out the tube. And you just, so yeah, I just stayed on the phone for like 3 hours that day. And then it was a grace moment. All of a sudden I was on the phone with this one guy and I was like, huh, that's weird. The cravings just like completely disappeared like right now. It was like really, it was like a vacuum cleaner. It was just like, and just gone. And he was like, "Yep, that's what happens. There's a grace moment. You do what you're supposed to, and God takes care of the rest. Your higher power takes care of the rest, and it happens all at once." So that was sort of a pivotal moment for me as well to know that, like, if I really was doing what I needed to do in the program, that I could, have success and not have to go back to that. Now, I will say though, when I was in Florida, I didn't stay sober, didn't stay all the way sober. So I did have relapses, not on hard drugs that at that point, but we would go to this Kratom Kava bar, and there's a big debate about all of that. I'm not going to get into that, but for me, especially the Kratom
Mhm.
was an issue. And also I was like drinking alcohol very occasionally and a few times heavily. And then there was some acid got involved at some point, which was a terrible experience. God was really waking me up on that one because my roommate and best friend and manager, he had been drinking that night. He was a raging alcoholic who was in recovery, but when he drank, he was raging. But he ended up, I took acid, he was drinking. We ended up getting in this person's car. And when he got out of the car, mind you, note that I'm tripping balls. Now take this story now, just take that information and process what I'm going to say now. So I'm tripping balls. He gets out of the car, and as he gets out of the car, his leg, and we still don't know how this happened. Like we still laugh about this. How, and he is big. I mean, a bodybuilder. I mean, you should see his chest is like the size of a lot of women's, and it's just like, holy smokes. Like he gets out of the car and his leg just snaps. Chin just, I mean, it was like a stick. Just, and you heard it. I saw it, and I'm just tripping balls. And I'm just watching his leg just snap like a candy cane. And so we have to basically now, this kid who was like 16 years old, who worked at the same restaurant we did, who had like this sports car, we have to get this giant bodybuilder dude. Mind you, I'm still tripping balls. Me, that 16-year-old kid, had to like lift this bodybuilder, like 190-pound dude, back into the car with a broken shin, snapped shin, and then get him to the hospital. Mind you, I'm tripping balls, and we had to get him into the hospital. And that was just like okay, another. I guess this is going back to your last question of, okay, wait a second, do I really want to go back into, like, because when you use, and your life just starts to go out of control very quickly. And I felt in that moment, holy shit, like this is just getting out of control. We were like drinking in our flop house, sober house room. We'd lock the door and it's 2 a.m. and we're drinking and we're just doing crazy shit. And it's just like, okay, I'm not using crack, I'm not using heroin, but my life is just out of control. I'm working at Cody's fucking Roadhouse, just miserable out of my mind. And like, just I was in a bad mental space, and things were getting out of control really quickly. There was a lot of chop. So even though I did have a lot of progression, there was also like I wasn't all the way there to really doing the deal of sobriety at that point
A
when I was there.
phone call craving moment that was after Florida?
That was in Florida,
That wasn't.
yeah. But that was before all that I just described. That was when I first got there and was really doing the deal, and then things started to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hey, you can cut this out later. Do you need me to get start thinking about light because the light that I have in my room is on the opposite side over here. And I could maybe potentially go grab a lamp and try and set it up because I'm noticing like it's kind of darker now with the lighting.
Still see you, and maybe I can lighten it myself. I'm not sure.
You think you can do video editing and just make it kind of brighter?
Yeah, I think you're okay. I think it would
Okay.
kind of be a weird
All right.
just if the sun changes really quickly, but uh
Okay, true. All right, just wanted to make sure. You can cut all this out. I just want to make sure.
totally. Yeah. Do you have cravings anymore?
Zero.
Europe.
Not even a passing thought.
What do you think helps you now, you know? Well, I'll also say, like, when I met you, you were living in an ashram, like, outside of Sedona, so I'm sure, you know I don't know if you wanna dive into, like, when you really started going deeper into, like, spiritual path. I'm sure that maybe helped, but
Yeah, I won't go into all of that because I'm trying to keep it specific to diction and stuff, but I'll mention it. But the the changing point, at least in AA, and I will say this as a general thing because I don't want to make this like it's a AA trumpet. Because I'll be honest, I don't go to more than maybe sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be once a month, sometimes it'll be once every few weeks meetings anymore. But to me, I work the program every day because of how deeply I practice Buddhism, Hinduism, hybrid kind of thing. It's 90, more Hinduism, but I also have strong Buddhist karma. So I do enjoy studying Buddhist things as well. Chocolate and vanilla to me, it's both the same thing. But all of the steps, and I even tell people this, like I'm working this, people ask me, are you working the steps every day? I say, yeah, I am, because I can go through all of the different steps, maybe not perfectly, or maybe, the one is not really necessary. Do I need to make amends to anybody today? No, maybe. And some days I do, and I do make amends.
yeah.
I did that yesterday. I went to my dad and I said, I just really didn't treat you right. And I really need to just say, and, even though he said, I don't even know what you're talking about, I said, well, I need to say this and I need to make amends to you. So it doesn't have to be AA, but I think there's certain things that in order for, really sustain. And again, I want to reiterate, there are certain people and I've met them. And this is the thing about infinity to me. This is more of a philosophical statement, but I'm more of an intellectual and my mind just operates that way. So I tend to get a little philosophical at times. So bear with me. But to me, reality, God, consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, pick your flavor, Allah, Christ consciousness, love it. Call it the whole thing if you want to, with a big dash between all of them. Great. But anyway, whatever you want to call it is infinite, and I think there's an infinite amount of potentials for recovery. So I think the minute that we become, very biased for one thing only, and I've seen that in AA, I've seen that in other groups, there's what they call that. There's another group of people. It's not AA. It's like sort of a alternate to I'm trying to think what the name is. Maybe God will pop it in my head later. But there's some alternatives to AAs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they will say, our way. There can be some bias in group members like, oh, you got to do it this way. Cognitive behavioral therapy, recovery therapy. There it is. CB recovery therapy. But to me, from experience, I'm not trying to say this as an opinion. I've met so many addicts and so many people in recovery that have, you know, gotten sober the white knuckle way, or like I said before, earlier in the conversation, where they were just like, okay, actually remember a guy like that. He was on the street one day and I was like, hey, are we gonna go hustle today? Blah, 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 blah. Like, where are we gonna, which dope are we gonna call? He was like, no, I'm just gonna go on my tent today and detox for 4 days straight. It's like, dude, are you for real? He was like, yeah. And he did it. And he just straight detoxed in his freaking homeless tent, and it was a winter and everything. And, hey, if you get sick enough of it, you're going to do it. So for all the power to him. And I don't think he ever did. I saw him sober out on the street again. And I said, hey, what are you doing? Like, it's done, bro.
Right.
Working a job now, man, doing okay. Like some people do that. Great. All the power to you. And then there's a lot of people where they try and get sober for 10 years. And it's, some people, they need more direction and they need more work to get to the point where they can stay sober. But also there's some people where they'll white knuckle it. and they want to use, they want to use the entire time they're sober, and they're not getting to the core, and they're just miserable
Yeah.
because they can't use, but they want to use. So I don't think that's good either. But hey, at least they're sober. So
Something's working, maybe.
yeah,
So how long
they actually call that an AA, the white knucklers. I'm sorry.
so how long have you been sober now from drugs and alcohol?
So my last use was June 6th, 2021.
Wow.
So it's a little over 4 years now, and that was a very interesting one. Hadn't used marijuana, alcohol, hard drugs, anything like that for quite a while, but and that was actually after ashram, or kind of during ashram, but after ashram, I was sort of in between at that point. But I still had a reservation in my mind, and they talk about this in AA, is when you do the first step, you have to surrender to the fact that you're powerless over drugs and alcohol, and also you have to eliminate all possible reservations regarding drugs and alcohol. And I didn't do that. And I still had a reservation for psychedelics because, in my mind, at that point, psychedelics were kind of in a different category because of their potential for spiritual experiences and for transformation, positive transformation. So I still was putting a big, positive light on psychedelics, which I still do in a way. But for me, I can't do that. As positive it may be, when I put drugs in my body, I get obsessive and I get compulsive, and I make bad decisions, and I um just can't do it. Just
Yeah.
can't do it. So yeah, basically just intuitively was realizing that it was time to be 100% sober. So yeah, that was my last use. I reworked a lot of this. Actually, I worked all the steps again with my sponsor, even though it'd been a while. But the first time I do want to talk about this though too. The first time I really worked the steps was after I had realized Florida was not going to work. I moved to Austin, Texas. That was just very shortly. That was the first time I really worked the steps, and I did all of them.
Nice.
And I had very, very profound experiences of letting a lot of that trauma that I had talked about earlier and a lot of that anger go, specifically in the fifth step. So whether you do it through AA, which is a very structured, the 12 steps are very structured, or you do it in a different way. I think that letting go, finding a way to resolve certain emotional or trigger points, trauma points that may be too heavy to handle and may lead back to a use is really important. So I had this very, very intense experience. It was kind of almost like psychedelic in a way, not psychedelic in the way that it's normally used, but it was just so profound because I shared this fourth step with my sponsor and was completely willing. I was doing my fifth and sixth step, was completely willing to just let all this shit go. All the anger that I had at corporations and the world and governments and economics and all the trauma and all of the, pain and suffering around family relationships. And I just was really ready to let, especially all that anger and resentment go in that moment, like full willingness. And it literally felt like in that moment, and this is one of those God moments, those grace moments, like this giant 1,000,000 pound cinder block just physically, energetically, like chronically, you're just like, oh, and it literally, I mean, that's why I say this. It literally, I try and describe to people, there was just this like, and that's why I say it was almost like the psychedelic experience because you're just like, oh my God. And I just started crying profusely. And at that moment, it became a lot easier for me to kind of continue on the path. But that didn't remove that reservation for psychedelics. So once I got that was kind of the final piece. And then at that point, so I've been, yeah, back to your original question. I've been sober since then.
Yeah, wow. Well, really grateful for that. I'm sure a lot of people in your life are
Yeah.
yourself. And my final question is, what advice or guidance would you give somebody who is still struggling in addiction, like coming out on the other side?
Well, so someone that's still in active addiction.
Yeah.
Mm,
Or someone who's in
yeah.
recovery, someone who's really like at the beginning of their recovery, either one.
Okay. Well, I'd probably speak to those two different people a little differently. So the person that's still in active addiction, I can say that, There is, I'm a living testament, as are millions of others, that it doesn't matter how low you are now or how low you've been in the past, doesn't matter what you've done in the past, doesn't matter what your criminal record is, doesn't matter if you've killed somebody. Like, there's always the potential to have a easier, freer way of life in sobriety. And, I'm just so grateful for the life I have today, of sobriety, because I can look now and, I still try and remind myself, and my best friend back in Florida will just try and, we'll try and remind each other to, he should write a book. You think my story's crazy? His is 10 times crazier. He has multiple people telling him he needs to write a book. But anyway, we can always like tell each other, like, dude, we think our problems are bad now, go back to addiction. Or for him, he was like a crack dealer, at like 12 years old on the street in the ghetto. He's like a crack dealer. So we can always go back and be like, do we really want to like complain about the little petty bullshit that we have now? Like, it's just so much better of a life, but not even on the outside. Like, yeah, like the money's there, the job's there. Like, I have a really nice like van now, and I have like, you know, potentials to like do all these different types of things, but on the inside is really where it counts, and just having a conscious contact with my higher power, being able to genuinely have most days where I have peace of mind, being able to not have the compulsion within me, even at all, to use, is a real relief. Like, and I'll say this, I mean, there's very, very, very occasionally there'll be a memory of a crack use, or even like a dream or something like that. I had a dream maybe like a week ago where I was like, there was some like needles or drugs involved or something like that, just like a memory.
Oh,
But I didn't wake up and like contemplate, like, should I go get high? It just was like, oh wow, it was a weird dream, So, or like I'll have memory recall where I'll vividly remember shooting crack and my body will respond. Because just because IV use of crack cocaine is so, like, the high is just so incredibly intense that like my body will just have like sort of a recall moment, or just like, and my heart will start beating really fast because, your mind is king. So your body's following. So it's like sort of like, whoa, but I just watch it fly through. It's just like, okay, this is just a memory flooding through. I'm not like, should I go get
yeah, yeah.
it's just like, oh wow, that was a weird little memory flying through, and like, I can just remember, like, yeah, I mean, but the amount of gratitude that I have that I don't have to deal with that bullshit anymore of contemplating, like, should I go get high today, or like, having to battle within myself, like trying to stay sober today, having done enough of the work to where it's very habitual now on what I need to do. I would never say like totally recovered. And they do say that in AA, and at least in the programs. Other places, they'll say recovered, done. I personally wouldn't say that, because I know that if I just completely let off all of my spirituality today and just, you know, went back in the gutter with my mind, I think eventually, how long it would take, no clue, but eventually, probably, you know, the idea of a joint or something, or a beer or a margarita. I don't know. But I even told my friend this yesterday. We were in Nashville hanging out at this little, like, sort of dive music bar type of thing. We were just getting food. And I'm talking to some, these little biker people and just having fun. But I told her, I was like, because I saw this guy and he had a Bud Light, and he had like that much beer in it. And you could tell he was just kind of like sipping it and putting it down. I'm like, it's funny to me because, like, right now, today, if I was going to drink, I would walk up to the bar before I got my food and say, hey, 3 shots of tequila, no salt, nothing, no fruit juice,
Yeah.
none of that bullshit. 3 shots to start. Then maybe we talk about food, but probably another shot after the three, because that wasn't. And then, I don't have it in me to do anything light, like sip a beer. And, it was funny. There was another guy, he like was drinking a mixed drink or whatever. and he left like half of it, and his friend was like, "Oh, you're not going to finish that?" And he was like, "Nah." And I was like, still, even to this day, I'm just like, how do people do that? Like,
You mean?
I'm not leaving a drink, like, So just being honest with myself that, there's no way for me to use or drink or, consume those types of things in a quote unquote rational way, like normal people do, which is something to say in the program. And, also, hey, like I said before, there's a lot of different people. I've met plenty of people. They do the California program, they get clean off the hard shit and they smoke weed. They don't have a problem. Go for it. I just know for me and for many, many other people I meet, can't do it, because as soon as I smoke a joint, I actually did this. I went to Colorado. I was traveling, went to Colorado. I was like, shit, I'm in Colorado, when in Rome, right? So I was like, it's not a hard drug, blah, blah, blah. It's the same ideas, that come up. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna smoke a joint. So I went down the Colorado River and had a big old, one of those. And I had kind of forgotten how freaking strong weed is these days. So I'm sitting there and just, it was way overwhelming. And I just felt really a lot of anxiety and a lot of paranoia. And also, the biggest thing was I started feeling really guilty because I had my sobriety time. A lot of people that looked up to me, my parents, my family, they thought I was sober, and I was sober. Like and now I had to tell everybody, damn, I got high. Now I have to restart all this shit. So, for me, just anyone that's still struggling with active addiction, I would just say that there is a incredible life on the other side of sobriety, and that I've seen many, many people who were active users, active drinkers, heavy hardcore for 30, 40, 50 years, and that came in, got sober, and was able to clear out a lot of their spiritual, mental, and even physical baggage, and was able to live a better life. So whether you've been using for a week and you find that it's a problem, or 50 years and you want to get sober, or you're thinking maybe that it's time to quit, it doesn't matter really how long you've been using, just that if you really put forward the effort to transform yourself and to say enough is enough, and to find people that have gotten sober and who know, like I said, it doesn't have to be AA. It could. I think it's a very good option. I would definitely recommend AA, NA. There's CA, Cocaine Anonymous. And let me make this clear too. There's also Sex Anonymous. Sex can be an addiction. There's Gamblers Anonymous. Gambling can be a huge addiction. There's Overeaters Anonymous. So I don't think we should peg it as, I mean, those are the biggest, I think, alcohol and drugs. But, I think if you're struggling with any addiction, it can be very serious. I've met people that gambled mortgaged their house to gamble everything. They spent, were stealing their wife's jewels and just literally blowing up their life with gambling. And they had, creditors coming after them. And so gambling can blow things up in your mind and your spirit. That's where it really matters. So any type of addiction, if you're struggling, no matter how deep the hole's gotten with work and effort and with the resolve to, change things, like not only is your higher power slash God slash whatever you want to call that, or even just the universe, you want to call it the universe, there to help you if you want to live a new life free from that. But also there's so many people that actively want to help you as well. And for people, what was the other thing?
What would you say to anybody going through active recovery right now?
Mm. Yeah, I would say anybody that's in active recovery, the amount of work that you put into it, it's pretty much like anything in life, the amount of work that you put into your recovery is what you're going to get out of it. So, the more work that, and I say that from experience, I also say that from the experience of, meeting hundreds and hundreds of other alcoholics that have shared the same, or addicts. Um, you know, if you just sort of, or I'll say the times in my recovery process where I didn't put much work in, where I just sort of came to meetings and surface leveled it, was the times when eventually things broke down, and whether I went back out and used again. I either went back out and used again eventually, or I was just really unhappy. And so, yeah, I would say that's really the main thing is having some type of support, whether that's one person or many people. But I think for me, I would say just being around a lot of different alcoholics and addicts, having a group to help in the process is really, really helpful so that you are able to call people when you're having cravings, especially in the beginning, the first year, especially in the first 90 days. The first week, 2 weeks, it might be easy or it might be difficult. Some people have different experiences, but um, when things get more difficult at some point in the first month to 90 days, you need some type of support to where you can call people and connect with people to get that extra effort sort of supplied to you from them, from their background of experience. So having some type of support and also having the resolve and the you know sort of that courageous attitude to no matter what it takes, and the humility also I think is really big to do the things that other people are suggesting you to do, because if we were able to get sober and stay sober, we could have done that. But for most of us, especially in my experience and many others that I've met, our ideas about how to stay sober are not so good.
Mhm.
Like that's what I wanted to reference when we first started this chat was the relocation thing. That might be a common idea, and or a new relationship. I just need to get out of the relationship I'm in, be in a new relationship, or I just need to get a new job, or I just need to like, get my kids back. I've heard that. Can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Or, so if you really just focus on all the material things and think that that's going to solve your recovery, it's not, you
Mhm.
know. Um, there has to be a way for individuals who are in recovery to start to tap genuine sources of joy and contentment in their life, and to start to tap spiritual currents that I think for me and for many others, the drugs were trying to fill the place of a spiritual void. So, whether that be religious or through AA or through, um, even atheists can get sober, but
Mhm.
there has to be some type of way to have a meaning or a purpose, to where you can sort of put that in your heart and really feel that there's a purpose to your life. And it might not come, maybe not in the first year or so. Maybe it does. I don't know. But I think that as long as that it feels that there's that block or that wall or that emptiness is still there, I think that the potential at least to revert back to the mean, which is drugs and alcohol, to solve that existential problem or that spiritual problem within you, it's very easy to just revert back to the mean.
Mhm.
And so you really need to kind of take a stand and to say, no, like I'm going to do everything I need to do, and take advice from people that have 10, 15, 20 years or even a year or even just a little longer than you.
Mhm.
If you're just getting sober and someone has, 90 days, they probably have some information that might help you get to 90 days. So, um, yeah, I would say those are the biggest things. Solving some of the issues, like if you try and get into like, oh, well, it's my trauma was the main problem, and if I just solve the trauma, I think that can be problematic. So I think that that could be an inner way to just kind of ride the surface, whereas in the outer way, it could be I just need to get the girl, the job, the relocation, the blah 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 blah. On an inner level, if you just take it on the surface level and say, I just need to like come to terms with or like let go of the trauma that I experienced as a child or something like that. Um, Again, maybe it'll work for you, but I would say that if you want to, do everything that you can, then I would say that from my experience and from seeing, like I said, hundreds of other addicts like me, that I, it's not enough to just sort of, you know, deal with things like that.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, it's powerful. And I think this whole conversation is gonna, yeah, I don't know, shed some light for, I know it did for me. I've definitely feel like I learned a lot about just from your experience and your willingness to share it. Um, I think, as you said, we're all in this together. So this will hopefully create a mirror for other people to look at themselves and look at their journey and give some hope and clarity and insights and light bulb moments. So thank you, Gopala, like for being who you are and for sharing your story and yeah, being willing to be so vulnerable about all the different pieces. And I appreciate you. And is there anything else you'd like to say before I stop the recording?
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap up, I would say that, I give a lot of the credit to the people that, stuck their neck out for me, to my mother, to,
Mm.
for helping me to get locked up, and for my many different sponsors that I've had, for all the people that stuck through me even through the dark times, and my parents, and um, but most of all, for me, I'm gonna call it God, because uh, now I look back and I can see that God was there the whole time. God was there as that cold wind, and that, and those times, where things were really dark. I was being pushed and motivated into a better direction, and that, God sees when we put forward effort, and if we do that, there's these aha moments, there's these grace moments where you can't quite explain how you progress so quickly through certain things, or let go of, years of pain and anguish and trauma and this and that. And then all of a sudden, in a moment, it can be gone, but, um, so yeah, I'm very happy to share all this, very happy that you brought me on for this interview. And my hope for this was that, today I try and follow, I didn't get into all this, but yeah, like you mentioned, I went all the way from living on the streets to living in an ashram, and was doing kind of formal religious training at an ashram with a monk living there, Swami. And the biggest thing in that arena, in that spiritual life, is to try and transform our life into an offering.
Mm.
Whereas the ego-centered life is trying to extract from the world for our own personal happiness, which is a delusion. To think that we can satisfy our ego, to think that we can achieve ultimate happiness through desire. And addiction is just a very aggravated or aggressive form of what we all deal with. So I think even for those out there that are not addicts, maybe it'll be beneficial to you to contemplate these different things that I've been discussing, as far as, where is the ego really trying to take me, and where is God really trying to take me, and what are my habits, even if they're not to the level that maybe I've experienced them or other people have experienced them. Are they causing problems in my life? Is it disturbing my peace of mind? And, doesn't really matter in a way how bad things get. I think that ultimately anything that disturbs our peace of mind and that takes us out of the sunlight of the spirit,
Mm.
anything that blocks us from that full-on bliss of our true nature, of our soul nature, is something that we can, look at and say, all right, can I let this go in my life and move on from that and start to take resolves to better myself and to kind of move on from these patterns or addictions. And they can be mental too, they can be emotional, they can be, or like, codependent relationships a lot of people deal with, or, addicted to ways of thinking.
Right.
So I want to let people know that in the closing remarks that you might be watching this and thinking, oh, well, I've never stuck a needle in my arm, but, it can be as simple as, am I addicted to, you know, um, ways of thinking about myself, degrading myself kind of on the inside, or beating myself up on the inside about, how I didn't do this or how I didn't do that, or, my life is so shitty because of this, blah, blah, blah. Just addicted to negative self-talk,
Mm.
I think.
Mhm.
So I think that anybody really can take the principles of recovery, and apply them, and it can work. It can work to recover from um, any type of negative pattern or negative addictive pattern. And just hope that, this might be beneficial and very uh, inspired by you and your life, and happy that you were able to bring me on to this stage, and very grateful for the interview.
Mm. Inspired by you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Blessings.
Blessings. Make a beautiful night. Bye.
Okay. Bye.